Kia ora koutou katoa, haere mai, and welcome to another episode of Sidekick TV. And today we've got Carl Davidson joining us from Research First. Thank you for joining us today, Carl. And I believe we're going to be talking about critical thinking, something that is, I think, at the forefront for a lot of us, especially in this particular point in time that we find ourselves in. And just a quick reminder, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and also be sure to check us out on Facebook in our Facebook groups, the Sidekick Business Lounge. But yeah, without further ado, thanks for joining us, Carl.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I've been, I think since we started doing these Sidekick TV episodes, you've been the natural guest to have on board. And I was just saying the fortunate timing of it when we'd organised this day to record, and then I think I'd switched browser and just saw that you'd just finished this presentation on LinkedIn. And so, you know, this critical thinking, essentially why everybody talks about critical thinking and yet so few people do it. So can you introduce us to this idea?
Oh, well, thanks, guys, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? We live in a world absolutely awash with data and full of information, and actually working out how the hell we navigate through that and knowing what we can trust and believe in is a critical skill, pardon the pun. The problem is, of course, people think that critical thinking is something that we all learn at university or in schools and that we're all good thinkers. And so when you start talking to people about how do we improve our thinking skills, of course, they all start from the position, well, I don't need to improve my thinking skills. I mean, he might, you might, but my thinking skills are great. So one of the things you've got to do to people is demonstrate just how many thinking errors we all make during the day as a natural course, right? And so what we've done in this course is we've brought on our cognitive psychology expertise along with our sort of insights expertise to show about all those errors that your brain makes without you even knowing about it.
Yeah.
Just for our audience who might not be familiar with Research First, would you be able just to elaborate a bit of a catch-all?
Yeah, sure. So Research First is it's now, I think, either the fifth or sixth largest insights company in New Zealand. Its head office is in Christchurch. The difference is it was started by a bunch of social scientists. So we're psychologists and sociologists and anthropologists, and we're really interested in, you know, how people think, what they believe, how they behave. And that's got real power if you're involved in policy research or if you want to know what's happening in markets and consumers. But we're really interested in getting upstream. You know, how do you actually understand how people put together a belief? How does that belief get translated into behavior? How do you change their behavior? The company tagline is making the complex simple, because the things that we really like are really complex problems.
Yeah. I've known your business partner for a number of years as well, and we've got some, I think I'm friends with some of his family members, so when we get together at those barbecues, we're just usually sat in the corner talking about these really complex, you know, big data sources and how you define that down. And I mean, you're right. I've always considered you to be a marketing company or an add-on to marketing and engagement and getting people to act.
But think about that though, right? So marketing's all about influence, right? You know, marketing's about influence, advertising about influence. You want to influence what somebody thinks, what they believe, what they feel about your product, their behavior. They're going to purchase it, are they going to come back and purchase some more? All of that's applied psychology, right? We work with the Public Relations Institute in New Zealand. They want to change your mind about something. They want to make compelling communication. That's about influence and changing your behavior. That's applied social science. We're in the applied social science game. But my fear is if we said, we're applied social scientists, the phone would never ring. So we say we're market researchers, we're behaviour scientists, and we're good buggers. That's our pitch.
Exactly. And so this, you've been doing a project here by the looks of it with the Marketing Association, and this is around this critical thinking to marketers from your depth of knowledge in the psychology side of it. So is this something you believe that we all need to be good at?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, let's shout out to John Miles, who's the newish CEO of the Marketing Association. Who, so the first pitch has been marketing, critical thinking for marketing, but these tools work for anybody dealing with information. And John and I were having a conversation, and he was the first one to see there's a real opportunity here to kind of upskill professionals, in this case marketers. But my God, this stuff works for accountants and it works for policy planners and it works for all of us. In fact, Rick, we were talking before, my great belief is this stuff should be taught in school. I mean, I've spent 7 years at university, and whatever critical thinking I learned at university, I picked up along the way. Nobody ever taught me critical thinking.
Yeah, well, like we were saying earlier, this was mentioned to me first in, I think, 1997 or 1998 by my history teacher. And she said, you know, the archaeologists dig the stuff up. It's the job of the historians to work out what's true or not. That just stuck with me for the last 22 years. And it's made me think, with all of this information, true or false, I mean, I think you can roll the dice when you open the paper whether it's full of truth or not, right? So the skills to be able to, and they are skills, aren't they, not knowledge, you know, to be able to refine that, to validate, that seems like the key thing. And I look at my children now that are aged between 5 and 10. What can we be doing there? Don't just believe that because they said it.
Yeah,
you know?
and I think to further elaborate on why it's even more important now more than ever, I think it's because of world politics. I know that's your speciality, but world politics in general, where we find ourselves right now with this current pandemic, but then also the progression at which information is being exchanged and technology is evolving. I think it should be at the forefront of everybody's minds, really.
Look, they're all great points. I mean, I think, you know, what your teacher said about historians goes for all of us, right? It goes for all of us as professionals. It goes for us as citizens. It goes for us as parents, you know, actually understanding what can we and can't we believe. So critical thinking is absolutely a skill, right? But actually the problem is it's more like learning a foreign language than learning how to hit a new tennis shot, right? You know, if you've got to improve your backhand, you go to the tennis club, hit a few hundred of them, and you know, Robert's your mother's brother. but critical thinking is about actually training your brain to actually think quite differently to the way it wants to think. So one of the problems we've got is, as human beings, we're all what's called cognitive misers, which means that we actually do as little thinking as we can get away with. And that sounds like it's pejorative, but it's not. It's just a product of evolution, right? Your brain evolved to use as little energy as it can. And this makes more sense when you realize that on average your brain's about 2% of your body mass, but it uses up about 20% of the energy you put into your body, right? Good tip there though, right? Make sure that if you've got important decisions to make, you're well fueled. Don't make important decisions when you're tired, and don't stack up lots of important meetings late in the day, right? Just having that insight about the fact that your brain burns energy can change how you go about dealing with information. But the way that evolution squared that circle is it's written into your brain all of these things called heuristics, these rules of thumb that you can just use all the time, right? You just use them all the time because most of the time they work. Or at least they did work when we didn't live in a world full of the internet and fake news and the complexity we've got to deal with.
When it comes to finding a cave, finding food, finding water.
And that's a good point, right? You know, evolution doesn't give a damn about accuracy. It cares about what's called processing fluency. You know, evolution is about keeping you alive. Your brain wants to keep you alive. Doesn't care if your argument's accurate. You know, only in the last few hundred years do we care about that, and there's no mechanism in evolution that can keep up with that change. I mean, you think about how quickly we've industrialized, how quickly we've become an information society. I mean, Jesus, smartphones only go back to 2007, right? There's no mechanism in evolution that can keep up with that change. So we have to create mechanisms, right? We have to teach ourselves. We have to arrest that impulse to do the thing that's easiest. And that's the really hard part. That's why it's more like a foreign language than a new skill.
Yeah. And it's almost like a foreign language, and you don't really know many other people that speak it. So,
That's great. That's totally true.
Yeah,
it's totally true. So, you know, if you think about, people say to me, how do you capture this really quickly? That, you know, it's simple, right? Suspend judgment. Because the first thing you're going to want to do is rush to judgment. The first thing you have to do is suspend judgment. And then you just have to ask a couple of really simple questions. How do I know that? If it's you that's suspending judgment. Or how do they know that? If it's somebody telling you it. And as soon as you open that possibility of how do they know, you can then get into all of the questions we talked about earlier about, you know, what's your evidence? What assumptions have been built into your argument? What does your evidence look like? Does the decision flow from your evidence? So then you can start applying your skills once you've created the opportunity to have a discussion about something that otherwise people are taking for granted.
Absolutely. I mean, I find it myself in my own kind of professional development arena. So I've essentially only ever done sales, and when I go somewhere to learn more about sales or how to do this, especially ones where it's about selling accountancy, And I just have to, slap myself about the face a few times first and just go, I've got to walk into this room knowing nothing.
Yes.
Be open to the idea. Yeah. And it's so quick to find myself going, I don't think that would work. Yeah. And I just go, no, right?
So two really good tools, right? So two really good tools. The first one, it comes out of improv comedy, and it works really well for meetings, works really well in those situations. It's called the yes and rule, right? And the rule is whatever anybody says, you're not allowed to say no but. Which is your first instinct. You have to say yes and you've got to build on it. So that's the first tip. It's a really good tool. The second one is ask a really naive question, right? You go in there and just pretend you know nothing about sales, nothing about this industry. Hey, listen, kind of new to this sector. What would you guys do? Yeah. And what naive questions do is they give you permission to ask about the things that everybody else takes for granted, right? So those things that aren't necessarily built on a really strong evidential base, but are just kind of things that have cobbled together over years of experience.
That's, and I mean, everybody celebrates that person asking the naive question as well, don't they? Especially the presenters, I think, How many times have we had events in this room and it's like, are there any questions? Like this bit was quite complex.
Yeah. I'm sorry, look, I might be a really slow learner. I might be the only one in the room thinking this, but explain to me again how this is going to work. Yeah. How's anybody going to make any money out of this? Yeah, absolutely. You said before about skills, and I've tossed out a few things. Suspend judgment. How do you know that? But one way to think about critical thinking is to think about it as thinking much more like a scientist than a lawyer. So your brain wants to think like a lawyer. It just wants to prove the case for the prosecution and the defence. It wants to stack up all the evidence, demonstrate how right you are. Scientists don't think like that. Scientists have an idea, and then what they try and do is prove that idea wrong, right? It's called falsification. Right. And what a lot of people forget, particularly if they've been years away from university or they don't work in science, is science never proves anything right? What it does is it proves things wrong, or it fails to prove things wrong. And the example everybody uses comes from a guy called Karl Popper. And he said, imagine your really simple idea is that swans are white. Really simple idea. How many white swans would you need to find to prove that idea right?
One.
No, all of them. All of them, right? Yeah. Because let's say you go and gather up 1,000 swans. Well, how do I know that the next 1,000 swans aren't going to be grey? Yes. Right? So you need to find all of the swans to prove they're white. Yeah. But how many black swans do I need? One. Yes. That's the point, right? Yeah. One falsifying case proves the idea wrong. Yeah. And we're wired to look for confirmation. We're wired to go and look for the white swans. And what we need to do, which is why it feels like a foreign language, is train our brains to go and look for the damn black swans.
And so I talk to my children about this, again, because I'll say things to them like, what colour is the sea?
Yes.
Straight away, blue.
Yeah.
Perfect. So the sea's definitely blue. Yeah. So if you went and grabbed a glass of the sea, came over to me, and show it to me, what colour would it be? Yeah. And they go, oh, it's clear. Mm-hmm. Is that right? So what colour is the sea? Yeah. Well, the sea's clear, but we don't actually see it as clear. Yeah. And I was like, right, but you could argue until you're blue in the face, the sea is blue.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because what you're actually demonstrating to your kids there is both of those things can be true. Yeah. Right? The idea that only one thing can be true is itself, it's a product of Western thinking of a few hundred years. And that's what gets us into trouble, because all of those things can be true. The sea is blue when it reflects the sky on a nice day, and it's clear, and it can look grey or green, right? Yeah. One of the examples we use in our teaching courses, we ask people, what's the tallest mountain in the world? And they immediately reach for an answer, right? And the answer they give is either they go, oh, everyone knows it's Everest, or some smart ass goes, it's Mauna Kea in Hawaii. Yeah. Both of those answers are true. But there's actually a better answer. The third answer is Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador, because the Earth's not properly spheroid. It's called an oblate spheroid, so it's squashed in, which means the equators stick further out into space. Chimborazo is the closest point to the moon. Right? So if you actually measure height by closest to the moon, Chimborazo wins. If you want total height of the mountain, Mount Kea wins. Yeah. If you want height above sea level, Everest wins. But the point is, everybody reaches for an answer and nobody goes, what do you mean by tallest?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you mean
I
by...
just want to be right.
So, so the thing to be teaching your kids wouldn't be what colour's the sea. We'd be teaching them, what do you mean by colour, Dad? Right? And one of the things that we do in our kind of our strategy work, is not to ask is that question true or false, but to ask under what conditions could that be true. So your kids go, the sea's blue. It's much more interesting to go, under what conditions is that true, right? Because the sea is blue to your eyes under some conditions, and it is clear under others. So under what conditions is that true? And what does that tell us about the nature of the thing we're studying? I mean, we're using examples like mountains and the sea, but let's start thinking about what that means in our everyday lives. What does that mean for customer loyalty, for employee satisfaction, for well-being? Like actually start thinking about the things we really care about, and those same problems of definitions become manifestly apparent.
And another around innovation.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you were mentioning the person earlier it reminded me of a story I'd heard years ago where Google, you'd argue, must be one of the most innovative businesses in the world. And they came up with, how do you ruin an idea? The falsifying through science. Right? So come up with the wackiest idea, and it's our job to tear it down. And I think they do that. Yes, and.
So what Motorola do, interestingly, in their strategy session, and we've ripped off their ideas with our strategy sessions, is they get the senior managers to sit around and come up with a company that would put Motorola out of business. It's called the kill the company exercise.
Wow.
And you guys can do this at work, and you can do it with your clients, right? Because all you're going to do is identify the weaknesses in your current business plan and positioning. The idea isn't to kill the company. The idea is to find out where its weaknesses are so we can address them. So our competitors can't slide into those gaps. So that's that same kind of counterfactual thinking, right?
Kill the company, I mean, for us, I've been thinking for a number of years now, it's blockchain and AI and just how secure and powerful that could be at giving incredible insight. That's what could potentially kill our company.
Unless you're the leaders in that.
Exactly. We sell blockchain and AI. And it's, I'd like to talk about a story that Xero was accused of the same thing years ago. In fact, my old boss nearly got into an altercation in the Langham Bar from a competitor of Xero's who said, you and Xero are destroying the accountancy industry.
Wow.
And it's like, well, how do you mean destroying the accountancy industry? In Timaru, I was told that a number of the practices down there were trying to almost boycott Xero because it was taking away from the industry.
But again, think of the language like destroy, right? And then think about the notion of creative destruction. Capitalism progresses by creative destruction. It's not that you're getting destroyed, it's that a better solution is coming forward. You're not taking work off those guys, you're creating a better solution for your customers. I mean,
the customer wants. It's only destructive if people start buying that, which validates it.
And that's a nice link back to critical thinking, right? Because one of the things when you apply critical thinking to marketing is you think about what's the really deep-seated need that your product's fulfilling in the client, right? Not what does the product actually do. So, a good example is social media like Facebook. It's really about building communities, overcoming isolation and loneliness. Those are deep-seated needs. People have connection, not wanting to be lonely. Right now, Facebook's the best solution we've got for that, or other kinds of social media. There'll be better solutions. That need's never going to go away, but the solution will change, right? Once upon a time, the best solution we had for how do I get my accounts looking sweet was I worked with an accountant who used a ledger and double entry bookkeeping, and now it's not that.
That's going to change as well. I feel like it is at this point in this interview that I must make a full disclosure that whilst I've had brief chats with you before and I didn't have any idea where this conversation was going to go, which is a testament to the whole intention behind the Sidekick TV, but my mind is already just racing at 1,000 miles per hour. So I think it's a testament. I've already started the exercises that we're talking about right now.
That Motorola story will stay with me. I mean, I think every business should look at this. How can I kill my company?
Exactly.
What would kill my company? And then
address it. And make sure you're the one that instead of your competitors. I should have said at the beginning. So critical thinking is about thinking, right? That's all it really is. And lots of people get hung up on the word critical because it's a word that has history, but it also has baggage. You think, does that mean you're going to be is this about criticism? Is this about criticizing? It's
You're
not.
going to be critical about
It's
me,
in the
yeah.
academic sense of a critique rather than the sense of criticism that it gets used. Actually, critical thinking could do with a rebrand, right? But the idea is great. Thinking about your thinking in order to improve your thinking, and the ability to arrest your thinking while it's happening. So I'm a psychologist, right? And in the world of interpersonal psychology, a lot of the chat is about you can experience an emotion and you don't need to express it. So when you're dealing with people, often you're trying to get a pause between the experience of emotion, I feel really angry, and the expression of that emotion, and I'm yelling. If you can get a gap between those two, you can change the behaviour. Critical thinking is the same, right? That's why suspending judgment is so important. You read something, you go, oh, that's crap, you know, and then you're looking for a reason why it's crap. That person's a moron, you know, the method didn't, you're just lining up the reasons. Whereas if you can stop that and ask yourself, under what conditions might this be true? You can then start working through the kind of mental checklist we've talked about. Yeah. What assumptions have they made? What data have they referred to? And do all of those things lead to the conclusion they've come to?
And is that literal cheat card that you showed me?
Yeah, right.
So if this seems too tricky, has this been put out by the Marketing Association?
And Research First. So
Research First, we can see.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly that. So there's a thing called a keystone habit. You probably know the Power of Habits book, right? Yeah. So the keystone habit idea is if you can get a habit that breaks a habit and then other habits can build upon it, you're away.
So you're habit stacking from there.
That's right. So we think that's the keystone habit. We give people that checklist and we tell them to bring it out in meetings or in arguments with your wife and actually make sure you're working through the damn thing, right? You know, like, because it just gives you an ability to ask those questions. Yeah. You know, what would it take to convince me this is a bad idea?
Yeah.
Can we get these in...
So does the logic of this argument make sense? I might not use this one at home.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, interestingly, so, you know, we bundled all this up for the Marketing Association and we called it Critical Thinking Fight Club, just to get some attention. And you know, the real first rule of Fight Club is you never talk about Fight Club. The first rule of Critical Thinking Fight Club is don't raise your voice and prove your argument. Tried that a couple of times on my wife and it's a disastrous thing to say. Often because her arguments are better than mine anyway. But
I was going to say, can we get these in red and yellow cards? So just pull one out. Critical thinking.
Yeah, actually, that would be a great idea. Make them as yellow and red cards. I'm sorry, you've made an assumption.
Suspend your judgment.
Well, we should take a snap of this and we'll post it in the comments for the video.
Yeah, and I've got that on PDF, which we can send.
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
That's no problem.
Great. Yeah. But no, I mean, these are great. Like you say, like what evidence for the argument has been cited? Now, if we pick on, say, that one here, so what evidence for the argument has been cited? Yeah. That might be tricky for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying before. That question, how do you know that, is so powerful. I'll tell you why it's tricky. Again, one of the shortcuts your brain takes is this thing called the introspection illusion. You think you know how your brain works, but actually you've got no clue, right? And the reason you've got no clue is, this is putting it crudely, but it's close enough. You've really got three brains in your head. You've got your good old-fashioned reptilian brain at your brainstem. You've got kind of a mid-brain, which people call a mammalian brain. And then the bit that you think of when you're thinking, your human brain's the bit on top, the squiggly bit, right? So we think we live our lives in the squiggly bit, but actually most of what your brain does, it does without consulting you, right? Your brain does most of what it does without consulting you. So what you think of as thinking is a really automated response, okay? Here's a really simple example. What's your mum's maiden name? Okay, how do you know that? Yeah. And you're not allowed to say, I just do, or it just popped into my head. Because nobody actually has an answer to the second one. Yeah. Nobody has any idea. But it feels like you know, because you know it. Yeah. And that's the difference.
I know, because it's my bank login second question.
Yeah, well, that's a mnemonic for how you remember it, but it's not how you know it, right? Like, because those answers just pop into your head. Like, you know, what year was the Treaty of Waitangi signed? You know, the answer pops into your head.
Well, that's actually quite interesting because I think for a lot of children as well, up until a certain age, your mom is just mom, and then you actually learn, oh no, they've got a name.
Yeah, they have a life without me.
Yeah. I was talking about this yesterday, actually. What evidence has been produced? Okay, so we can cover this with the really big topics as well, like climate change, like COVID, like any big argument, okay? And I'll often say, just to play devil's advocate or whatever, and you just go, what evidence have you personally seen that backs that up? Because we are led to believe, especially if that belief
and look, this is a much longer conversation, but what that gets you into is not all evidence is like some evidence is better than other evidence, right? You know, a Facebook poll of 1,000 of your friends is not the same as an interclimate, you know, an expertise panel that's lined up 200 bloody climate experts
Yes.
that have done, you know, studies over a million data points.
Yeah.
You know, like some data is better than other data.
Yeah.
The problem you've got, though, is your brain's going to look for confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So you want to believe something, and you find something that supports it, and you will lean on that. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how often I go, but hold on, look at all these scientists saying the opposite. You'll go, no, you know. To be fair, since COVID, it seems like experts have regained some of that status. But prior to that, you know, there was a whole lot of people saying, sick of hearing from experts. I don't want to trust the experts. Yeah. You know. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, but then, and again, it comes down to the validation of experts, and you know.
But then again, so here's the thing. So a lot of, for most of us day to day, we can just do an experiment, right? We don't actually have to line up the evidence. There's a thing in philosophy called Aristotle's error, right? Aristotle said that men have more teeth in their head than women, right? Aristotle was married twice and he never bothered to check. Like, you don't need to write books about that and stand up and have lectures for 1,000 hours. You know, we can just look.
Yes.
And Werner von Braun, the guy behind the Saturn V, said that one test results with 1,000 expert opinions. And I always like that. You know, like, if you have the ability to test and measure, let's just test and measure, you know?
When we apply that to a business sense, so I'm one definitely for get out and start doing something. Mm-hmm. Don't let perfection get in the way of action.
Absolutely.
Now, do it, you'll find out if it works or it doesn't.
Yep.
Is that a good scientific approach? Or
yes, with the
brain surgeon.
With the caveat. Yeah. With the caveat. Well, even with a brain surgeon, with the caveat. So there's a distinction between reversible and irreversible decisions. Yeah. So you don't want to bet the company on that. Yeah. But as long as the decision's irreversible, as long as the decision is reversible, you might as well just go and give it a punt. Yeah. Right? Because we can rewind it and have another go. If it's an irreversible decision, you probably need to think a bit more carefully. But I'm with you. I think acting more. I mean, I'm a researcher, right? I'm come and buy lots of research. But actually, I'm much more in the let's experiment. Yeah. Let's actually try it and see. And again, that gets us back to the question, under what conditions will this work? Under what conditions is this true? Yeah. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, wonderful. Hey, look, I'm sure we could run this video for a day, right? So we should.
This has been great. Thanks, guys.
I was actually going to say I've been practicing self-restraint from going off on so many different tangents, so many different times. But thank you so much for your time, Carl. And if you're picking up what Carl is putting down, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you aren't already a member of our Facebook group, join us in the Sidekick Business Lounge. And we'll drop down a link to Research First, and also
photo of this.
And drop us a comment if you'd like us to get them on again, because I'm definitely keen. But until next time, stay safe.